You're listening to Radio Blah Blah with Jeff and Jeff.
Okay, here it is, another episode of Radio Blah Blah. I'm Jeff Scott, baking in the sun here in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada. And also sweating it out over in Nova Scotia is...
I'm lavishing in the sun, Jeff Gray.
Lavishing, right on.
Cool. I'm cool, Uncle Jeff.
And I'm melting, Uncle Jeff.
Happy
summer, everybody.
Mug. You mug.
Well, it's been a while since we did a show, Jeff.
Yeah, not that long, but a little bit. A little quicker than we've been lately, so it's not too bad.
Yeah, well, big changes, you know. I just did some renovations on my house.
Yeah.
Ripping out walls, building a new music studio, so...
Nice. Yeah. It looks great.
Thank you. You're looking right at it now.
I am looking at it.
Yeah,
I can't...
Skype.
We'll have to...
Actually, I'm going to turn off my video so we'll get better audio.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah. Okay. So, anyway, we were looking for a topic to discuss and rolling around some ideas, and I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to have a debate over the Beatles and the Stones? You know, everyone kind of argues who's the greater rock band. And then I started thinking about the whole British thing. And you know, Jeff, when you look at it, there's almost two British invasions. One in the 60s and one in the 80s. What do you think of that?
I agree. What do I think of it?
Yeah, just tell me what you think.
You always ask me those questions. It's like, you know, there's air in the atmosphere. What do you think of that? I think it's a great thing that we have air in the atmosphere. But you're right. There are two invasions, and I mean, surely the 60s and the 80s, and I think they're a great topic, and they sandwich the 70s right in between. And we know we got a lot of great music out of it.
Yeah, definitely. So, are you a Beatles man or a Stones man?
Yes.
No, they're not in the. They're not part of the equation.
I think that. I think that there's, you know, while people put them together, I think that I equate it this way: the amount of incredible, iconic material that the Beatles put out is unparalleled by any artist ever.
Exactly.
Now, so it's almost unfair to compare the Stones, you know, in terms of their output. Now, mind you, you know, certainly their longevity obviously is far surpassed that of the Beatles. But
well, the Beatles packed it in 1970 or 71.
Yeah, and it's just incredible.
You know, the Stones, they're still going.
and
so, you know, they definitely deserve the Lifetime Achievement Award. They just for being out there and keeping it going.
They get there, and I guess that's what makes it so difficult to compare, because really, and we've talked a little bit about this before, the Stones really their last relevant material came out in the late 70s, and they've been sort of playing tours ever since. Whereas the Beatles,
they're a nostalgia act, like half the bands on tour today.
No question. And then the Beatles did so much in so little time.
They did, from 1964 to 1970, just a huge
it's incredible
body of work. I think one of the reasons that people compare them is because, you know, the loyalty that people have had to these two British bands, and the fact that they are such, you know, pioneers of the British invasion. You had the Beatles coming over in 1964, appearing on the Ed Sullivan Show, and I think within a calendar year, the Stones came over and you know, kind of repeated that same kind of Beatlemania, appearing on the Ed Sullivan Show, and you know, almost very, very similar, and that kind of led the British invasion. And again, just the loyal following that these bands have had for the last 40 years or more.
Well, if you look at the context of it all, and likely you don't remember, but I actually do remember when the Beatles came over. I remember seeing it when I was just a tiny kid on TV. I think I saw the Shea Stadium on TV live or something like that. And but the Beatles came over, and then the Stones were sort of like the antithesis of the Beatles. They came over with the same, you know, the hairstyles. So they copied sort of the mop top Beatles look.
But if you look and compare the two, there is quite a difference.
Absolutely. But they came over. They came over sort of as the bad guys. You know.
Yes.
It was like
the Beatles were clean cut compared to the Stones.
At least
the way Mick appeared
early on, right? But that was, I remember that was what it was. It was sort of like they were the the wrong side of the tracks Beatles, and they were sort of kind of compared against each other that way back when. So I think that's where the comparisons really come from. And frankly, a lot of bands adopted that kind of look and attempted songwriting style, throughout throughout the rest of the '60s.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, they were, like I say, they were the pioneers of the British invasion and just led the way. And but in terms of style, when you say are you a Beatles person or a Stones person, it's really comes right down to musical choice, because I don't think there's anything in the Beatles repertoire that sounds anything like the Stones, and vice versa. They're just so completely different. And I think I'll go out on a limb here and probably get some bottles thrown at me, but I think that in terms of diversity and songwriting talent, I think the Beatles certainly showed stronger diversity and stronger talent. And I find that Stones songs can very much sound very similar. Do you find?
Yeah, and I think there's no question that the diversity. It's today, and I appreciate it even more today as I listen to. I shared a link with you the other day of a guy named Tommy Emmanuel. He's a guitar player from Australia. He's quite
amazing.
Isn't he amazing? But he does a medley of Beatles songs, and he's one of these Chet Atkins types. And I say types. He was inspired by Chet Atkins, but I look at the melodies that are so iconic that the Beatles have put together. It's just, and if you look at their songwriting from "I Love You, Yeah, Yeah" to the things that were happening on Something in the Way, it's just incredible diversity and melody sensibilities that were amazing. I remember seeing you were talking there, and I remember seeing a clip, and I can't remember if it was Mick or if it was Keith Richards or somebody being interviewed around the time that there was this kind of faux feud going on between the Beatles and the Stones, and somebody in the Stones saying they're really crap. They don't. I'm paraphrasing, of course, and they're really not as good as they think as you think they are. Listen to them in stereo, and when you actually hear them playing their instruments, they're not very good. There was something to that effect, and there was this. Yeah, really, honestly, it was like listen to that. Remind me of that Spinal Tap, moment. He's a wanker. He's a wanker. He's got this much talent.
Yeah. Right.
But I remember.
Yeah, that's something I often wonder. That Spinal Tap moment is that tension between two touring bands, and these bands like to show camaraderie and fraternity amongst their colleagues, but we wonder what kind of goes on between a band that we talk about a lot, Kiss. They'd be on tour with these bands, and some bands they liked and some bands they didn't like. And early in their career, when they were opening for certain bands, they used so much pyro and so much theatrics on stage that other bands didn't want them anymore because they were upstaging the main act. So we often wonder, what kind of getting back to Beatles and Stones, what kind of tension and stress or feud there is between bands, either touring or just competing for that same market.
Well, if you have to put everything in context as well, in terms of when the British invasion happened in the '60s, what was it invading? Motown was huge, right? And I was actually a Motown. I really liked a lot of Motown music when I was a kid, and I liked the Temptations and those kind of things, and oh geez, I'm trying to think of the what's her name? It'll come to me anyway.
Whoever.
There was another Motown, the female group there.
The Supremes.
Yeah, this Diana Ross and the Supremes. Duh. Yeah, I couldn't think of that, but that was what. This is kind of what they were invading.
Well, this is it. I mean, American audiences had just gotten rock and roll invented in the 50s. And I do a unit on this in my high school music class, but basically rock and roll is a racist term because at the time in the 50s, teenagers were playing rhythm and blues that they were hearing on jukeboxes, and their parents didn't want that because it was black music. They call it colored music, or they called it race music, and someone like Alan Freed wanted to play this stuff on the radio. and he couldn't get sponsors to support him because they thought it was colored music. And then they started the bands like, I could be wrong historically, but bands like Bill Haley and the Comets and Buddy Holly and the Crickets were doing this form of rhythm and blues, which is much more upbeat than the usual Pat Boone and Doris Day that people were getting on the white radio stations. And the teenagers loved it, and they had to call it something else, so they called it rock and roll, right? And sometimes you didn't know, when you heard an artist on the radio, you didn't know whether it was a white artist or a black artist, and yet the parents were still, in an outrage over this new rock and roll. Call it what you want. They thought it was race music. Anyway, there's your little bit of rock and roll history for you. But at the time that the Beatles came in, rock and roll had been ever present for a good, 8 or 9 or 10 years in the United States, and it was primarily American music and dealing with their own racism, whatever you want to call it, within that music. And now all of a sudden you throw in this other thing. You've got this Beatles and Beatlemania, and then the Stones, and then this big flood of other British artists coming over to the United States. And now it's like, well, the Brits are doing it just as good, if not better, than the Americans are doing it. I think the Beatles sold more albums than Buddy Holly and the Crickets. I could be wrong. I don't know. I don't have those facts in front of me. I'm just speculating.
I would probably make a wager to that effect. And I would say I watched. There was what was it called? It was a documentary I saw with Keith Richards recently, and we talked about the British invasion, but it did start in America, because he and Mick Jagger both were hugely influenced by black blues artists. In
Led Zeppelin.
They're not black.
No, but they were completely influenced by blues, American blues, right? When Mick sings, he sings with an American accent, right? He puts on that southern drawl, right?
Yeah, I was kidding.
And Led Zeppelin, you'd think it was Muddy Waters. No.
Well, that's what.
My apologies to Muddy Waters fans, but that's the sound they were looking for.
But no question. That's what you saw from Keith Richards and Mick Jagger, was they were really influenced and really into that music, and it was very difficult for them to get, actually, in Britain at the time.
Yep.
But that translated into their style. So while it was a British invasion, it was actually born in black blues music in the United States, really.
Oh, definitely,
right?
Definitely, yeah. Well, rock and roll began in the United States. It had to migrate over across the pond, and then the Brits came back in their British invasion and showed the Americans how to do it better, and that's the evolution of rock and roll.
I never forget when I was 5 years old, I think it was, and my dad had a record. It was 64 or 65. He had a record of the Beatles and Frank Isley, and it was like the oddest record. And he was like a Tony Bennett type of a singer, and so half the record was the Beatles, like Love Me Do on it, and then we would have one of their tracks, and then have one of his tracks, and then one of their tracks, and I remember as a little kid, their style was very, like you said, it was that quick rock and roll style, and in and out, 2-minute song, 2.5 minute song,
radio friendly.
Yeah, but that was on the same album. It's Frank Isley.
Who?
I know. Well, he definitely never became what they became, but
no.
Go look for that album though. There's
he and Pete Best are on tour together.
Jeez.
Just as an aside, I was thinking about the this unit I do on the history of rock and roll.
Yeah.
When rock and roll became big, artists like Pat Boone started remaking songs like "Ain't That a Shame" by Fats Domino and "Tutti Frutti" by Little Richard. And the reason he remade these is because they wanted white artists making white versions of these highly popular songs, so that parents would buy for their kids and say, okay, you can listen to this, it's safe, it's been recorded by Pat Boone. And one of the most racist things that I show them, it's a clip, you can find it on YouTube, it's Pat Boone redoing "Ain't That a Shame," and it's actually from a Canadian TV show, and I can't remember what the name of the show is, but I know it's Canadian, and it says, like pouring cream into coffee.
Oh my gosh!
Like pouring
Really?
coffee. Pat lightened and brightened a rock and roll classic or something like that. But basically what they're saying is we've whitened it. We've taken a black artist recording and we've recreated it. Now, here's what's interesting. When I show it to my students, I'll show them Little Richard doing Tutti Frutti, and then I show them Pat Boone doing Tutti Frutti, and they just laugh, right? They obviously pick Little Richard over that. And then I show Fats Domino doing Ain't That a Shame, and then I show the Pat Boone version. It's just so clear that I don't know, these original versions, the rhythm and blues just had so much more soul. And I don't want to say anything in a racist way, but it did. There was a difference. There really was a difference. And Pat Boone just took these songs and actually ruined them. And then just for fun, I'll play the Cheap Trick version of Ain't That a Shame, just to show how it transcended a couple of decades, and it's still a great rock and roll song.
Well, I mean, I remember that, and I remember that Pat Boone and artists like him. There was definitely a you know, a change, an anthropological change going on, if you will.
Oh yeah.
In the '60s from the '50s. I mean, the '50s were so idyllic in the United States at least, and probably here in Canada as well. Actually, the '50s were still going on in the '70s when I moved to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
I found it was like 10 years behind, but that not in a bad way, and but it was just like going back in time a little bit. But
Yeah.
in the '60s, I mean, '60s became much darker than the '50s. You know what I mean, in terms of just but so did, and I think that came with, you know, the music reflected that. Like, it was so, you could listen to music of the '50s and the '60s, you wouldn't even know that they were. They were. You would expect that the decades would be further apart than they were. Let's put it that way.
Well, you know, not having been there, I can't really say. I mean, I can only look at the '50s from what I see in movies and TV shows.
Yeah,
and Happy
me
Days
too.
in Greece, right?
Yeah, me too.
And I'm sure that's a very, you know, false fabrication of how it really, really was. It's like when they make movies today about the '80s. It's like the '80s didn't really look like that, right? You're stereotyping everybody.
Well,
but one of the things I do mention is that the '50s was the perfect stage for something new, because, you know, the United States, well, all of the world really was recovering from World War II. You had your baby boomers, you had jobs, you had, you know, families were felt safer, they were happier, they had more money, everyone had a car. It was just, the stage was perfect for something new, and I think we're for the most part, the '50s is probably a happier decade than the '40s, without a doubt.
yes.
It reflects on the music. When you listen to a lot of that
Yes.
'50s rock and roll, it's happy. It's about love. It's about cars. It's about going to the beach. It's about
Not a
just
care in the
fun
world.
things. Yeah, exactly. I mean, just listen to some of that, and it's just such happy music. You know, the '60s. Now you're looking at, you know, things like Vietnam and the shooting at Kent State. Certainly
even
some
earlier,
darker things going on.
Kennedy-
and earlier, Rosa Parks and
Kennedy assassination.
Kennedy assassination
63.
and Martin Luther King. You still get your racism going on. So while there's this happy, fluffy, white kind of facade in '50s rock and roll, and underneath that, you still got the racism that kind of perpetrates through into the '60s. And now you've got, you know, bands like Bob Dylan and Buffalo Springfield and Neil Young who are reflecting the times in their music.
And none of them are British.
No.
We've digressed, is my point.
Isn't Stephen Stills British? No, Graham Nash. is. One of them was.
Nash is, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's you're right. It's like the '60s was an awakening, or you know, the dream was no longer the way it was, and I know the '50s through my parents, because they were teenagers in the, you know, in the '50s, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they lived, you know, I've seen pictures of them, and at the sock hops and at the root beer stands, and, you know, it was a lot like Happy Days, and, you know, the high school Letterman, and, you know, and in the '60s became so diverse and so dark so quickly, and then the British music came, and had nothing to do with that really, because really it was, you know, they think about it, the Beatles came over and they weren't dark, they were actually.
No, they were that happy rock and roll thing.
Definitely.
But look how much their style changed.
Yeah.
Just getting back to their music repertoire.
Yeah.
I mean, think about how diverse their songs. Think about how Sgt. Pepper sounds. Then think about how Revolution sounds.
Yes.
Then think about Blackbird.
Yeah.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
Yellow Submarine, which is just kind of silly.
Yeah.
They just had this huge, wide range.
They did anything.
You could take. I'm sure you could pick 10 Beatles songs at random. And just throw them out there and say, "Wow! Just listen to how different these all sound." You pick 10 Stones songs.
Yeah, I agree.
You're gonna have a very similar sound. I remember at one time in the '80s, it might have been the '80s, Keith Richards had made a solo album. So they said, "Okay, we'll play a track on the radio," and it started. I thought, "My God, it's so Stones sounding."
Yeah.
I mean, it just without Mick, it still sounds because Keith does a lot of vocal. It was just dripping with Stones. I was expecting to hear something slightly different, but no.
You could take 10 genres of music and take 10 Beatles songs and find a representation of it.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's like Zeppelin.
Even like I said, folk, heavy rock,
acid rock,
everything,
rock and roll,
not metal,
country,
not metal, but
But think about Revolution. That's a very heavy guitar sound.
Oh my gosh, is it ever?
And Helter Skelter, very heavy,
extraordinarily heavy.
Well. Yeah.
I mean, did you ever hear Pat Benatar's version of that?
Of Helter Skelter?
Yeah.
I don't think I have.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, she does a good job. Yeah.
Her husband Neil is so underrated.
I agree.
My God, what a guitar player. I'm really, there's so many, we talked about this before, underrated guitar players. But Neil, I think it's Geraldo or
Geraldo, yeah.
He is so underrated. He is really
I used to be in love with her.
Oh, who didn't? God. 1982, Pat Benatar album appears in your Columbia House mailing.
Yeah, wow. She had the perfect blend. She was a perfect blend, and they still play together. And
they do. Just her and Neil with a guitar. That sounds great.
They do, and they are. They're the sum of each other's parts, really. You know what I mean? The two of them. And I don't think she would have been what she was, believe it or not, without him, and vice versa. I know that's not British, but that's okay. This is Radio Blah Blah, right?
That's right. We can talk about anything on Radio Blah Blah.
We can.
Let's talk about the British invasion of the 1980s.
Okay, yeah.
Wasn't that interesting?
Well,
it's interesting, and I think we didn't really notice it until you think about today's pop stars, and I don't even know who's big today, but I find that there's a lot of British acts that we don't know about, and they're really hot in Britain. And in the 1980s, we were getting all of that. Everyone who was hot in Britain made it across the pond. And I think for the most part, our pop music of the 80s was dominated by British acts.
I don't disagree. I guess who are you thinking about first of all? So let's talk about the actual groups for a second.
I'm going to refer to a video from 1984 called "Do They Know It's Christmas" by Band Aid.
Yes,
which is put together by Sir Bob Geldof.
Yes,
and if you look at that, you see some very iconic people.
Yes.
You've got Bono from U2. Yeah. You've got Phil Collins. You've got Bob Geldof, Boy George, George Michael, Duran Duran, Simon Le Bon. Just some huge British acts. And today, I don't know anyone who's a big British act. Bananarama. But not only that, I mean, Annie Lennox.
Yes,
and I mean, almost anyone who was huge and iconic in the 80s seemed to be British. They really were. Queen. I'm surprised Freddie wasn't on that. That
is strange, isn't it?
Yeah.
What?
And there was none of those, and it was only people that were big at that time. And what you don't see on that are anyone from The Who, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, Stones, Beatles. You don't see any of those British invasion people from the 60s invasion.
Because the other British invasion in the 80s was also like Judas Priest a bit and Iron Maiden.
Are Priest British?
Yes.
Okay.
No, they're Scottish.
Not a big Priest fan. Big Iron Maiden.
They're Canadian, actually.
They're Canadian. No, they're Scottish.
Oh my God! Can't believe
it. Always comes back to
Slade.
That.
Yes, you're never going to live that moment.
Scottish.
You're never going to live that moment down.
No,
and the Chili Peppers one. That is never going to.
I know. Yeah. Give it away. Give it away.
I'm not doing it again.
No, you'll get me laughing.
I know. That's what.
No, I just found that everyone who was big in the 80s is like, oh, they're all British. They're all British. Everyone's British. Why is everyone British? You know?
It was pretty diverse at that time. Like there was that was you know, the 80s was new wave, early 80s, right? Was the new wave, post punk. A lot of one hit. We talked about this on a one hit wonder show. A lot of one hit wonders in the new wave genres. Certainly a lot of British influence in our music at that time. But I think it was.
And to the point where some of these Canadian bands were doing things with a British accent. Have you ever noticed that?
Like who? Like I think you're right.
I'm trying to think of one offhand.
But you notice what I noticed though.
I can't think
of
it.
Okay,
But when it comes on the radio, we often say, like, "Oh yeah, that's a Canadian band," and it's that one moment where they're trying to sound so British.
Or you know, it's funny how these things go. Like you listen to music in the '80s, and then all of a sudden, all the artists who sing like the '80s, you know, became. You know, that's just how they did things. That's just that they played guitar a certain way, they sang a certain way, and then you go to a different, you know, decade or a different genre, and then it becomes popular to sing in a different way, and I don't know where these people are. Just do they migrate? Is it because the people are out there and they already are that, and they just take advantage of it, or that they just start doing it that way because that's the way to do it? You know, it's like the '80s was definitely like different types of song styling, you know, of singing, which sounds British, but to me it sounds more new wave than you know. Like I mean, take like a Canadian band like the Spoons. Yeah. Right. For instance, what's that?
And that's one of them. I mean, to me, they could have been British for all I knew.
But that sounded new.
That's the way they sounded.
They sounded new wave to me. And there's all these bands like the Police. Not the Police. Platinum Blonde. Early.
Oh yeah.
Early Platinum
Blonde. That's the band. That's the one. Right.
It's standing in the dark.
Really matter.
Doesn't really matter.
Doesn't really matter.
Well, you can't have your pudding if you don't eat your meat.
How can you have any pudding if you don't eat your meat?
Martyr. Doesn't really matter.
You laddie. Stand still, laddie.
Exactly. That's what they did. Mark Holmes, and then they screwed that up. I actually liked them a lot when they first came out.
Yeah.
Like simple, police-like, right?
Very pleased. And again, Sting. He was also in that.
Yes.
Do They Know?
Did you know Platinum Blonde used to be a police cover band?
Probably. I can see that.
There's no probably.
Oh, okay. No, I'm just saying I agree with you. Yes.
Oh, I say, yeah. They actually, I remember they.
I can see that.
I remember them when I was in. I was living in Halifax at the time, and they would come to town periodically and play the colleges, the universities, and they were a police cover band.
Really?
Yeah.
See, I find that kind of odd. Did the Police have that much fan base and body of work to enable a tribute band?
Yep.
Because Platinum Blonde would have been on the go as Platinum Blonde doing original music by the mid '80s.
Mid '80s, but yeah, no, they did because they were Police were like early '80s, right? And they were very Police were
that's true. I remember them around 1980. Da 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 da.
Yeah, but they were very prolific in a very short period of time as well. Police are British, aren't they?
Yeah. And the other one is Safety Dance, right? The Canadian band, Men Without Hats.
Oh, yeah.
I could
You can dance if you want to.
Yeah.
Safety dance.
It's a safety dance.
I used to hate that. I
did too, but it's retro now.
I don't know.
You hear it on radio, you just want to turn it on.
I know. It's one of those things that at the time I was like, oh, you're kidding me. Because it was sort of like, what's happened to my rock? What's happened to my rock?
Exactly.
These things are...
It's like, I don't hear a guitar in this, so I'd be watching the Friday night videos, and they'd show Safety Dance, Men Without Hats, and the little dwarves dancing around, right? With the little mandolins and lutes. And I'm thinking, it's like, this is just stupid. And then the next video would be
the dwarves are
AC/DC or Iron Maiden. I'm thinking,
those dwarfs were in danger of being crushed by a Stonehenge monument.
I was waiting for the Stonehenge monument.
The world of Jeff and Jeff, according to Spinal Tap. We should, we could probably make references to.
There's a whole show.
No, give us a topic. We could probably find this. Spinal Tap.
It's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Everything will come back to Spinal Tap eventually.
We should have a show. How many we talk about giving random topics, and all we talk about is how they relate to Spinal Tap.
Exactly. Who were British, by the way. And there you go. This is American film with American actors, American writers. And where did they choose to set their band?
British.
It was a British band.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they were making fun of that whole, Iron Maiden, genre, the early '80s heavy metal.
I do think they were
genre.
making fun of the Stones too, and
Well, they made fun of every band, every big band in
Agreed.
some way.
Agreed.
But the fact that they had those British accents, just that was just the icing on the cake, right? Because everything they said either sounded really cool or really stupid, and sometimes both at the same time.
Exactly.
I mean, I think if they did it with straight American accents, it wouldn't have been as funny,
No,
would it? Because to American audiences, right? When Nigel says something like, "I don't know, that's my gum."
This my
You know,
gum.
right.
What's right? I might lose it.
I might
What's
need
it?
it later.
I might.
Yeah, but he's not as confused as Nigel is. I mean, all those lines just sound so much funnier with the British
Well, they do,
accent.
yeah. So that's just what I love when they do. We're gonna go sidetrack here. I love when they sing the Elvis Presley song together. Rock.
Yeah.
They turn to barber shop.
Yeah.
Since my baby left me. Since
And they
my
even do that with a
baby
British
left
accent.
me.
No. You take the high part. I'll take the
No,
low.
right. Sounds a bit raga.
It does sound raga. But it'd be nice if we were in the same key.
Yeah. That's classic.
Well, that puts a lot of perspective on it.
Yeah, too much fucking perspective, if you ask me. This is sad. This is sad. Here we are, sitting here.
Yeah.
Two geeks in their basement.
Yeah. Basement podcast.
But British invasion. Yeah. So you weren't a Priest fan. I wasn't a Priest fan either, actually.
No. In fact, you know what? I didn't. There's a couple of tunes that come on now, and I'm thinking, I listen to the Boneyard or whatever stations play some of that 80s metal. House of Hair with Dee Snider, I like that. And there's a few Priest songs that I really like, but most of them I never really cared for. Iron Maiden was different. I don't care what you say. You could take Priest and Metallica and Def Leppard and all them and just kind of... But Iron Maiden, they were different. I saw this great little meme on Facebook yesterday, and it just came out. Iron Maiden was put together by teachers to secretly teach kids about literature and history. And it's true, right? I mean, I never heard of Rime of the Ancient Mariner until I became an Iron Maiden fan.
True.
Right?
Yeah, it's
You know,
true.
You learn about the Great Wars. You learn about, all kinds of history. You learn about prostitution, too.
That's right. That's what street was that?
22 Acacia
That's
Avenue.
what it was. Yeah.
Charlotte the Harlot. She'll teach you more than you can know.
Well, you talk, but Judas Priest is actually makes me. I actually like some of the newer stuff. I actually like more. But there's I always chuckle when I hear some of the lyrics, and of course they were over the top with leather and studs, and that's why they were so Spinal Tap. And it's like
They almost look like a caricature of the heavy metal movement,
Ah!
just like Spinal Tap.
yeah. And they would do the stock moves on stage, but I always laugh at lyrics like hell bent for leather. What the hell does that mean?
Oh, the worst one. A buddy of mine got a new Priest album. He said, "Come on over, we'll spin this." I said, "All right." And he was playing "In the Dead of Night."
Love bites.
Love bites. And I thought, this is awful.
That wasn't one of my favorite. I like Painkiller.
There's a couple of those tunes that I just absolutely love, and I can't.
Well, it goes both ways.
It's older Judas Priest. But they play
Living
a
After
couple tracks
Midnight
from time
is really poppy.
Yeah, it's kind of pop.
Yeah, that's not a little bit. I like the new stuff. They did an album called Retribution, I think, a few years back, and some pretty cool stuff. But there's some pretty, there's also some pretty corny, traditional, singing about. Well, there's one song they do, it's Loch Ness. They sing about Loch Ness,
Oh yeah.
and it's kind of funny. Loch Ness. I don't know. I'm not gonna. I'll get screwed if I try and sing that. But it was just some song. It's almost like some kid decided to write a song about, pick something, like Godzilla or.
I was just gonna say because Blue Oyster Cult had already done.
Yeah, I know.
So
Yeah.
Loch Ness. There you go. Nessie.
I don't think. Blue Oyster Cult's not British, right? No.
No, they're American.
Yeah, American.
American band.
American.
Yeah.
We're in American. Grand Funk.
Gotta have my hamburger.
Hamburger. Yes. You see that?
Making
Speaking
fun of Americans here with an American.
Yeah, it's okay. I can do that. I
You can do that. I should.
I'm getting rather political these days, which I shouldn't do, but I seem to be getting more political. And then I keep waiting for someone to say, "Yeah, well, you Canadians can shove it up your ass." I keep waiting for that, but everybody seems to know I'm American, and right. So
American.
yeah, and so they don't seem to fall into that trap. But I see that Trump got in trouble for using using a Freddie Mercury song, right? Using a Queen song at their thing the other day.
I heard about that.
Yeah, we are the champions.
You know what? You know what the opinion I have on this Trump thing is?
No, what?
You know, there's a lot of British bands these days that are. I don't care for Trump.
Oh, you don't. I see what you're saying. Okay,
you lost me.
That's okay. Okay,
So
I'm okay with that.
Here's the thing: I don't know of any big acts that are British right now that are sort of big in the big music scene.
Right now?
I don't really know who's in the big music scene either. But
Ooh.
I know a lot of them are American. What the kids are listening to on the pop channel. You take a singer like Joss Stone, who's incredibly huge over in Britain, and over here people are like, oh yeah. But I mean, she's not the icon that Sting and George Michael were in the 80s. Nowhere near it. Another one I'll throw out is Robbie Williams.
Yeah,
big, huge British act, and he plays for the Queen, plays Wembley, whatever. It's like, who? And I like him. I like what he does. He's very interesting, very talented.
but there isn't.
But over here, he didn't catch on at all. So something changed. There was something in the 80s that brought this huge wave of British pop icons into our mainstream music that I don't think really happened in the last 20 years.
I think one of the things that have happened is that American pop culture has invaded Britain. And I think that
American pop culture has invaded the world.
Okay, but where I'm going with that is that if you watch shows, I was trying to think about, you just said that, and I thought, yeah, you're right. You said I'm trying to think, since the 80s even, when has there really been any, really iconic British acts come out, other than the Spice Girls? I guess that was the last big one.
That was probably the last one.
Spice Girls. But I thought, okay, so where would you find these things? So you'd get them on the X Factor, which is Britain, right? And I've watched that, and really, what I see over there is people doing covers of American music. Yep. Like the big vocals, and I don't see a lot of cultural music coming out of there. Like, you don't see the big countries of the world coming out anymore. And, Tears for Fears, I think they were British, weren't they?
I thought they were American.
Well,
I don't know. See, I don't know.
They could be. They just sounded British.
Hey, if you're big in the 80s, you were British.
Well, that's right. That's
and not to mention, the Aussie. Every now and again you get a big Aussie or Irish act. Of course, we mentioned U2, but they were actually Irish.
The UK.
And so is Bob Geldof.
UK.
The UK, yeah. So can we lump Australia into the UK?
No.
They're their own country, aren't they?
Yeah.
Are they part of the United Kingdom now?
No, they're part of the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
But they're not part of the United Kingdom. No.
But how many Australian acts can you name? Go.
AC/DC.
I mean Axel DC.
Axel DC. Men Without Hats.
Men Without Hats. Come on.
I think that's them, isn't it? Yeah.
They're Canadian.
No. What was the one down? No, Men at Work.
Men at Work.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Same time frame.
Yeah.
Bee Gees. Tommy Emmanuel.
Who are those guys that did "The Time Has Come"?
That was them.
That wasn't Men at Work.
No.
Midnight Oil.
Midnight Oil. They had the one song. Yeah. One song.
Olivia Newton-John.
Yeah.
Australian. Weren't In Excess Australian?
Yes.
Yeah. Who else?
I don't know.
So was there an Australian invasion?
No. Well, what else?
Because at one time Australia was just like the cool.
What about Roxette? What about Roxette?
Roxette? I have no idea.
I think they might be Australian.
Yeah.
Actually.
And I'm sure if you Googled it, Australian acts, it would just give you a list.
Yeah, I know.
Wow, I thought they were Scottish.
I know I'm missing. I know I'm missing something. There's some amazing Australian act that I'm not thinking of that I know is out there.
I'm sure we're missing the big one, but
no, I just have this really nagging feeling. There's one that it's probably some band I even like. Right, so
yeah, your favorite band?
Oh, Kiss.
Kiss.
They go to Australia whenever they need to look bigger than they are.
That's right, yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. So, like other countries have had their invasion. I mean, when you think about rock and roll going to Britain to influence bands like the Beatles and the Stones. So they had their American invasion of rock and roll. And then, like you were saying on the X Factor, all these singers are up there doing mostly American music. So
I mean, I don't actually know that. Just my impression, It's like
Yeah.
I just don't see, like you said, I don't see a lot of United Kingdom acts, kind of getting on the radio these days. And where's it?
Yeah.
Adele? She's American, isn't she?
No, she's British.
There you go. See,
I think. Well, there's one. Okay.
that's right.
And I'm
She,
sure
oh
there'll
yeah,
be
she's
more
definitely British. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
No, I don't mind talking about it. I saw her interview the other day. She's there. You go.
Oh, she's right. Cockney.
Yeah,
Right? When
yeah.
she talks, she's got the really Cockney accent.
Definitely. She's cheeky.
Cheeky. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. That's like the Spice Girls. One of them was so Cockney, I almost couldn't understand what she was saying.
Was that Mel B? I think.
The other one, Sporty Spice. The cute
Oh,
one.
her.
Yeah, when she talked, she's all right. Can you fucking?
She was Scottish.
Oh, she was Scottish.
She is. No, seriously.
She's not, is she?
Yeah.
Well,
Why do I know so much about the Spice Girls? That's what I want to know.
she's not Scottish. They're all British.
Mel C. She did a great cover. She did a great song, a duet with Bryan Adams.
Yeah, what was that called?
Since You've Been Gone, I think something like that.
Yeah, that was a great song.
I like it.
Really, really cool. Yeah, we tried that a few times with the band I was in a couple of years back.
I'm going to tell you in a second. I'm pretty sure she's Scottish.
You're going to Google it, aren't you?
I'm Googling it up.
What was I going to say about that? Oh, the Scottish. Their accent can be very, very thick and sometimes almost hard to understand.
Yeah.
I was watching the curling, and it was whatever team against the Scots. And, of course, they have their little wireless lapel microphones on, so you could hear the skips and the mates talking about the game. And I thought, my God, I'd almost want subtitles. It's really difficult to understand what they're talking about. The accent is very, very heavy. I don't know. I guess I'm generalizing, but I guess in parts of Scotland, like many parts of Newfoundland, the accent can be very, very heavy, almost to the point where you're second guessing certain things that they're saying. One of the things I found interesting was he kept referring to the fearfoot, and I'd say, "What is he talking about? The fearfoot? The fear of it? I don't know what it was." In curling, you have these colored rings. You got the 4 foot, the 8 foot, and the 12 foot, right? And the 4 foot is the ring closest to the center. It's the smallest ring, right? So you try to draw to the 4 foot, and he kept saying, "We'll draw to the fear foot." It's like I listened to him say fear foot so many times before I figured out he was saying the 4 foot. But anyway, that's just the difference in accents.
I stand corrected. She's English.
You stand. She's
Yeah, she's English. Yeah.
Yeah, because you know what? When she speaks, it's very Cockney. And I don't know much about different parts of England or whatever, but there's a Cockney accent. Like you'd sometimes hear certain characters on Coronation Street, and the accent's completely different. It's almost like a caricature of the British accent, with a much heavier emphasis on accent and dialect or whatever. I mean, I'm not a linguist. I don't know what I'm talking about. And people say, "Oh, she's so Cockney." And that one, Mel C and the Spice Girls, she had that. The other ones, the other girls were so British, but when she talked, it was really,
Yeah, I do. So, what was your favorite Spice Girl?
My favorite Spice Girl. You know what? Each one of them had something so.
That was your
different
fantasy.
about them.
That was your fantasy, a 5-way.
Oh my God! Each one of them had something so different and unique. Like the baby Spice, with her little lollipop and her pigtails, that did nothing for me. And yet I was watching this concert one time where she kind of abandoned that look and just went for sexy, and I thought, oh my God, it doesn't get any sexier.
I actually, it seems to me she was the one that was the raunchiest of them all at the end of the day.
Oh, probably.
That-
I don't know. I think Jerry.
Oh, yeah.
What was her name?
Ginger Spice, yeah.
I just like the red hair. She was so cute.
Not a posh Spice guy, eh?
I think she was the prettiest one, but she couldn't sing.
I don't know if she could sing that.
She didn't have the same moves, whereas Mel B, who's now on one of those shows, X Factor or something.
Yeah, she's on the, yeah.
My God, she had the moves, and I remember watching one. We had a concert on VHS, and she came out in this skin-tight leopard kind of a thing, and she was just shaking it, and I thought, oh my God.
It was working for you, was it?
Oh, yeah.
Scary Spice.
Scary Spice.
Wait, which
yeah.
one was?
And in some of the videos, she was just scary. She did nothing for me, and yet I'll watch a concert video where she just looked amazing.
I was a fan of Horny Spice.
Who? Horny Spice? Well, now they're just Old Spice.
That's true. That's true. So, but I'm twice as old as that. I never forget. We lived in Sackville, Nova Scotia, and I remember when the Spice Girls were coming into prominence, and the next door neighbors used to take kids in, like they had a preschool. What do you call it? Like, you know, I can't think of words today for some reason. Daycare. And these little girls were in the backyard, and I remember being on the porch having a cigarette. I used to smoke at the time, and they were running up and down. If you want to be my, they're all doing this. There's like 5 of them running around the backyard doing the Spice Girls routines over and over again. It was the cutest thing I ever saw, right?
Well, you know, they refer to them as the Fab Five
Yeah.
because there wasn't another British act since the Beatles that had that kind of influence. And you know what? It really was. You know, girl power was a movement. There's no doubt about it. I remember back around 98, somewhere around there, when Jennifer was involved with radio. We were asked to judge as part of the like the fall festival thing. They had this Spice Girls lip sync contest, and we were asked to judge it. So there was myself and Jennifer and a couple other radio people. So there was 4 judges, and my God, it was the cutest thing. I mean, they had like 7 and under, and then 8 to 12, and then 12 and over. They had these 3 different age categories, and we had little girls like 6 years old up there. They knew the moves. They were costumed to a T.
Yeah.
I mean, every little detail.
Yeah.
And some of the groups even had an African American girl in there playing Scary Spice, and it really completed the whole image. It was really, really cool. But it was so funny, and we had to judge this, and it was so hard. And I mean, for every kid that's up on stage, you got 2 parents behind them that are going to get really pissed off when they hear the results. So I said to the other judges, I said, now Steve is going to, my friend Steve Gadet, he's going to go on stage and he's going to announce the winners. He's going to introduce the judges one last time, then he's going to announce the winners. I said, you see that door? And we're in this big, huge, like a stadium kind of thing. I said, you see that exit door back there? As soon as the winners are announced, just make a beeline for that door, because I know. I teach middle school. I know what this stuff is like. Anyway, he announces the winners. I said, Jennifer, come on, let's get out of here. And we did, and I looked back just to see the other 2 radio people didn't leave. They just kind of stayed at, and when I looked, the judges' table was just swamped. And I ran into one of those people a while later, and they said, oh, my God, you were right. These parents just came up to me and said, do you know how much work they put into that? My girls were in their backyard the entire summer practicing that. They would practice from sun up till sundown. They made their own costumes. They did this. They did that. Angry parents, and it was just a fun contest, but it was fun watching this. I mean, it really was, it was a movement, girl power. Anyway, that's what I remember about the Spice Girls thing, was that competition.
Well, it was a British invasion of its own, and they were
It was.
And you think about it, again, just like many groups, they were influenced by boy bands, but those boy bands are always influenced by the Beatles. In the sense of, like, remember the Beatles, it was very, George, Ringo, Paul, John, a Beatle for every girl, right? And it was the same thing with the Spice Girls. It was...
Well, what American band could you compare the Spice Girls to?
I don't know. You got one in mind?
In terms of... What's
got
that?
one in mind, or are you asking?
In terms of each one had their own individual character. They had their own bubblegum cards. They had a movie.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Well, it became the formula, right? Because it was like the boy bands were the same way. Like when you put the boy band together, okay, we got to have the blonde guy. We got to have the sensitive guy. We got to have the tough, the streetwise guy. We got to have you got to have the rapper guy. You got to have
Well, Jeff, I'm going to cut this one a little bit short today. I'm actually having some technical difficulties with the recorder. It's cutting in and out, so we're going to actually wrap this one up. This was a great discussion on British invasion, both the 60s British invasion and that sort of second invasion that came along in the 80s. So anyway, it was great talking to you again, Jeff. And so this is Jeff Scott in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada, signing off.
This is Jeff Gray in Stewiacke, Nova Scotia.
Okay, we'll talk to you all again on Radio Blah Blah. Take care, Jeff.
Radio Blah Blah, Radio Blah Blah,